On the day of my second anniversary with Henry, I got into a car accident and fell into a coma. The girl who had secretly loved Henry for 10 years used a blood transfusion as a condition to make him marry her. 3 years later, I woke up. Henry had developed different feelings for her. Faced with his dilemma, I decided to change my boyfriend. Ellie, take a good rest. We'll leave first. The people in the ward left one after another. Slowly, silence returned. I looked at Diana, who kept glancing back at me, her eyes slightly red, biting her lip. I felt confused. In my memory, although we were high school classmates and university alumni, we weren't familiar with each other. Her tearful appearance when I woke up made me feel a strange sense of discomfort. With a click, the door closed completely. I turned to Henry and asked strangely, I shouldn't have lost any memories, right? I searched my brain but found no memories of anything beyond a classmate relationship with Diana. The doctor said you're recovering well, you don't need to worry. Henry affectionately touched my face, the gaze in his eyes still held the same deep affection as before my accident. Then he embraced me gently, like a precious treasure finally returned to him. I smiled and hugged him back. Are you very familiar with Diana? Why did she come to see me today? She looked like she was about to cry. Perhaps because I had been in a coma for 3 years, my memory stopped at the year of graduation. In front of me, Henry, dressed in a suit, had long shed his youthful aura, replaced by a refined maturity. This version of Henry felt somewhat unfamiliar to me. Not familiar, Henry simply replied with 2 words, tinged with a hint of impatience. I was taken aback. The Henry the first remembered was always sunny and enthusiastic. It was the first time I heard him speak like this. But since Diana was just an irrelevant person, I didn't pursue the topic further. On the day I was discharged, Henry held a banquet for me. All the notable figures from S-City attended. I wore a high-end gown, linking arms with him as we entered. I was the main character of today's banquet and the most dazzling presence in the crowd. Even after 3 years in a coma, standing next to the distinguished and handsome Henry, I felt no less than anyone else. After all, I had once been the white moonlight in the hearts of all the young masters in S-City. Why say once? Because I woke up 3 years later. On the first day, they visited me one by one, but I never saw them again after that. I didn't like them. Whether they came or not, it didn't matter to me. The person I cared about was already by my side. I turned my head and bumped into Henry's affectionate gaze. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded ahead. I turned to look. The tall champagne tower suddenly collapsed. The people chatting around immediately panicked and instinctively stepped back. Only one person stood still, looking helplessly toward me. I was puzzled as to why Diana was frozen in place, staring at me. Just then, I felt my wrist loosen. Before I could react, Henry had already rushed out in a flash, carrying Diana to safety. The familiar face bore an unfamiliar panic. It was the first time I saw Henry display such an expression because of another woman. My side felt a tension creeping up. A wave of sourness surged from my fingertips to my chest. I didn't regain my composure for a while. Are you an idiot? You see it's falling and don't know to dodge. I've never seen such a stupid woman. Henry's furious voice snapped me back to reality. The man in the black designer suit held the petite woman, scolding her angrily. Anyone could hear the concern hidden beneath his angry tone. In an instant, countless eyes turned toward me. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with mockery, and some with glee. It was the first time in my 25 years that I felt so many shameful gazes. I sensitively sensed that Henry's relationship with Diana was not ordinary. When he rushed to hug her, his posture was so familiar, holding her from behind as if it had happened countless times before. What did you say? You want a divorce? Diana, who gave you the guts to say divorce to me? It was you who forced me to marry you with the condition of a blood transfusion. Now you want to end it just like that? I was sitting on the upper deck, enjoying the breeze when I suddenly heard a familiar voice. The few short sentences left me completely stunned. What does divorce mean? Henry got married. Yes. It was I who forced you to marry me, and now that Ellie is awake, can't I give you back to her? Didn't you hate me? I won't bother you anymore. You can pursue your happiness. Diana's voice was tinged with tears. The response to her was Henry's passionate kiss in his fury. I raised my eyes and stared intently at the two of them kissing. My right hand pressed against my chest. The diamond on my couple's ring sparkled in the dim night light. And not far away, the man kissing Diana wore the male version of the couple's ring. He was wearing it while kissing another woman. A feeling of disgust spread from my chest, slowly radiating through every inch of my being. Ugh! Along with the sound of tearing fabric, my vomiting echoed. The couple kissing turned their heads in unison. I was sitting in a dark place, and they seemed to not have seen me clearly. But I clearly saw Henry take off his jacket and drape it over Diana, whose dress was torn to shreds. Diana's face was flushed, displaying a shy demeanor like that of a young girl. The person who had just mentioned a divorce seemed to be someone entirely different. Not long after, I learned from a friend about Henry and Diana's situation. At that time, I was in a car accident. Because I had Rh-negative blood, the blood bank didn't have it available. Even the powerful Henry family couldn't find someone with the same blood type to send to the hospital within half an hour. That was when Diana appeared. She had the same blood type as me. She agreed to give me a blood transfusion on the condition that Henry marry her. Few people knew about this because they had always been in a secret marriage. My friend knew because she was also outside the operating room at the time. Ellie, Henry has always hated her because of this. Now that you've woken up, they will surely divorce soon, so don't worry. Then my friend mentioned how much Henry had suffered at that time, but he had to agree just to save me. I listened to the sounds of blushing and racing hearts next door and thought to myself, what were Henry and Diana doing? Was it hate? After hanging up the phone, I opened WeChat, found the contact with the nickname A Dog Who Wants to Be a Sister, and entered the chat. Want to train a new dog? Within less than a second, the other party replied instantly, Woof sister, where are you? Look at me, my boyfriend held a banquet for me today, and you're out at sea now. Sister, do you want to train now or tomorrow? Sister, actually, I'm not in a hurry. Okay, I admit I was just pretending to be calm. I'm in a huge hurry. Send me your location. I looked at the continuous stream of messages and found it somewhat amusing, casually sending my location. Remember to bring enough equipment. If you're not satisfied, there won't be a next time. After turning off my phone, I lay back on the bed. The sounds next door weren't loud, but they were like a haunting melody. After listening for half an hour, I felt more annoyed than anything else. I couldn't muster any other emotions. At first, when I heard it, my heart felt a bit numb. Gradually, I became less sensitive to it. I couldn't help but think of the past Henry, the one from before my accident. He was sincere, passionate, and sunny, full of youthful energy. I sighed. In fact, I quite missed the Henry from 3 years ago. What about him? Why didn't he tell me he was married and still treated me like a girlfriend? Was it because he was also reminiscing about the me from 3 years ago? Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, pulling me back from my memories. I got up to open it. Standing outside was Aaron, wearing a black windbreaker. He still looked as spirited as I remembered, and his youthful energy seemed unchanged over the past 3 years. I suddenly thought that he was only 22 this year, so it was normal. Sister, I brought everything. I can guarantee you'll have whatever you want. He said with a beaming smile. I noticed he was carrying a large backpack, making him look like an energetic college student. How did you get here? I asked while stepping aside to let him in. Sister, my family isn't poor. I can buy you as many cruises as you want, Aaron replied, not really answering my question. I knew that Aaron's family wasn't poor. The Aaron family was one of the top aristocracies in S-City, and Aaron was the sole heir. I had grown up with Aaron. We weren't childhood sweethearts but had lived together as step-siblings for many years. Later, when my mom and his dad's relationship broke down, they divorced, and my mom and I moved out of the Aaron family. After I moved out, one day he came to my door, saying he wanted to pursue me. I scolded him and told him to focus on his studies. However, he persisted, messaging me every day, even after I started dating Henry. In Aaron's words, as long as you dig long enough, even the hardest wall will collapse. And he was right about that. When Aaron opened his backpack, I looked inside and saw a small pink whip, chains, and various bizarre items, making my mouth twitch. Aaron, I don't have a submissive inclination. Sister, you asked me to prepare these. He looked at me innocently. I fell silent. His comprehension was still the same as it had been when we were kids. I rummaged through the backpack and ultimately found that he had bought everything useless and nothing useful. Are you looking for this? Aaron grinned widely, holding a square box in his hand. I raised an eyebrow. You finally did one thing right. No sooner had the words left my mouth than Aaron's kiss enveloped me, and I stumbled slightly, causing us to both fall onto the soft bed. This meticulously arranged place was supposed to be for me and Henry. Plans never keep up with changes. He was sweating next door while I was being kissed passionately yet restrained by another person. In middle school, I had a Samoyed dog. It was incredibly clingy. Every time I came home, it would jump on me. At that moment, Aaron was just like that Samoyed, and I had become the delicious food he craved. I had been in a coma for 3 years, and before that, the intricate pain almost consumed me. Aaron looked at me in disbelief. Sister. I'm sorry, I didn't know. He appeared somewhat panicked. Just then, a muffled feminine voice suddenly came from next door. Aaron's face turned visibly red. I endured the pain and trembled as I spoke. It's Henry next door. Aaron's expression changed, becoming somewhat grim. He muttered something under his breath and leaned down to kiss me. Sister, I'm very obedient. I will never betray you. When Diana went to take a shower, Henry stood by the window, his fingertips glowing a faint crimson. He was contemplating how to handle Diana. He had long wanted a divorce, yet when Diana brought it up, he didn't feel relief. Instead, an unnamed anger surged within him. A voice deep inside told him he didn't want a divorce. He also didn't want to lose Ellie. But he understood Ellie's temperament well. If she found out he was married, she would definitely say the word breakup without hesitation. The alluring voice from next door only heightened his restlessness. For some reason, he felt that voice carried a hint of familiarity. The image of Ellie's cold, beautiful face unconsciously floated into his mind. Ellie was different from Diana. She was beautiful, elegant, and unattainable, like a bright moon hanging in the sky. It took him 5 years to reach for that moon. Henry suddenly recalled that after he saved Diana today, he had intended to explain things to Ellie but found no trace of her. He shook his head, dispelling the absurd thoughts in his mind. They had been together for 2 years without crossing that line. She wouldn't sleep with another man over such a trivial matter. Ellie wasn't that kind of person. But listening to the mingled voices of men and women next door, his sense of panic grew stronger. He turned around, picked up his phone, and dialed the number he knew by heart. The call went unanswered. The noises from next door grew louder. Henry irritably raked his short hair. Are you not answering, sister? Aaron's eyes, tinged with redness, held a fierce intensity he had never shown before. I was so provoked that I could hardly speak. Aaron, don't go too far. I gritted my teeth. The normally obedient Aaron was now a feral wolf, as if he were about to swallow me whole, especially after Henry's call came in. It felt like he had entered some kind of frenzy. Wasn't it said that guys couldn't perform the first time? Who was spreading such rumors? Sister, but you like it a lot. Aaron looked at me with innocent eyes, his voice hoarse, and beads of sweat trickled from his chin down his neck. The movement of his Adam's apple was particularly sexy. He exuded a wild, carefree demeanor that still had a youthful charm. I loved it. At that moment, I finally understood why, after learning about Henry's marriage, I felt a brief sadness but then secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The current Henry and the Henry from 3 years ago were almost 2 different people. Aside from his unchanged face, his entire aura had transformed. He was no longer the sincere and sunny youth I liked. So, it didn't seem like a loss after all. My body was gradually being opened up, and I began to crave this feeling. I thought, no wonder Henry said he married her for her sake yet could roll in bed with a woman he despised. At it turned out the experience was this good. The phone on the bedside table continued to ring, but my ears had long since ceased to hear any other sounds. It seemed that only Aaron's sexy panting filled my world. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a strange yet familiar place, Aaron's home. I opened my eyes and looked around. This was the bedroom I had lived in when I was part of the Aaron family. The decor was still the same as before I moved out, with not a single item changed. Habitually, I reached for my phone on the bedside table. As I extended my hand, I realized this wasn't my home. Just as I was about to retract my hand, I accidentally grabbed my phone. I quickly realized that Aaron must have placed my phone here. I glanced at the time and discovered that 3 days had already passed since that incident on the yacht. Memories of these past 2 days flooded my mind. Whenever I woke up, I would always be met with Aaron's lustful eyes, which seemed particularly fierce when he met my gaze. I couldn't hold on for long before slipping back into unconsciousness. I gritted my teeth and called out Aaron's name, determined that he shouldn't think there would be a next time. I unlocked my phone. What greeted my eyes were countless missed calls from Henry. I opened WeChat. Every message was unread. I clicked on my friend's chat box. I'm fine, I was just having too much fun at a friend's house these past 2 days and didn't pay attention to my phone. As soon as I sent the message, my friend's video call popped up. From my friend's lips, I learned that Henry had been frantically searching for me over the past 2 days. A faint smile curved my lips. The corners of my eyes held a mocking glint. My friend was surprised to see my expression and asked if there was some misunderstanding between me and Henry. I laughed and said no, then told her about that day on the yacht. After getting married, my friend immigrated abroad. She had always thought Henry had deep feelings for me, so she was shocked that he could do something so shameless as to covet what was on the table while eating from the bowl. She scolded Henry for a full hour in the video call, and I couldn't help but laugh at her. She told me that her baby's 100-day banquet was next month and invited me to come if I was feeling unhappy in a city. I nodded in agreement. Just as I hung up the video call, I looked up to see Aaron coming in with lunch. "Sister, you're awake?" In front of me, Aaron looked at me with bright, puppy-like eyes, as if the person who had previously tormented me was someone else entirely. I ignored him, threw off the covers, and tried to get out of bed. I hadn't been home for 3 days, and my mom was definitely worried. "I told Mom that you've been sleeping here these past 2 days." "Mom?" I looked at him with confusion. He had never referred to my mom as Mom when his dad married her. How many years had it been since my mom and his dad divorced? And he was calling her Mom now. "Sister, I'm very innocent. If you take me, you have to be responsible for me." Aaron's words made me feel a mix of shock and anger. This nearly 1.9-meter tall guy was asking me to be responsible for him? 2 months later, as I came out of the gynecology office with a list in hand, I unexpectedly saw 2 familiar figures. My boyfriend, who I hadn't yet broken up with, and his wife, Diana. Henry had his hand on Diana's waist, and Diana's delicate face wore a look of happiness, radiating a hint of maternal glow. Henry's gaze resting on her belly was especially gentle. I sneered. On the surface, he pretended to be deeply affectionate towards me, his girlfriend who had been in a coma for 3 years. Saying he had searched for me frantically, yet he hadn't forgotten to accompany his wife, whom he claimed to despise, to the hospital for a checkup. When Diana's eyes accidentally swept over and landed on my face, her expression turned pale instantly. A hint of panic gradually clouded her eyes. She hurriedly averted her gaze and pulled Henry, saying she was tired and wanted to go home early. Henry gently ruffled her hair and leaned down to place a light kiss on her cheek. They looked like a loving couple. It turned out Diana was so afraid of me that her face turned white at the mere sight of me. "Henry." I called out to them, crossing my arms and smiling as I watched the flustered expressions on their faces upon hearing my voice. "Ellie." Henry suddenly withdrew his hand from Diana's waist, his handsome face unable to hide his panic. "Don't misunderstand." Misunderstand what?" I tilted my head, glancing past Henry at the pale-faced Diana, left standing where he had abandoned her. You brought your wife for a prenatal checkup? Henry shook his head, his voice trembling. It's not what you think. I asked, she's not your wife? A look of pain crossed his face. Ellie, I married her out of necessity. He was surely going to say it was because he saved me, but I interrupted him calmly. On the yacht, when you tore her skirt, there was someone in the shadows. I smiled as I exposed his true nature. A look of shock spread across his painful face. Oh, right. Diana covered her mouth in surprise. I was staying next door that night, and you two did it without realizing I heard you. At my words, all the color drained from Henry's face. His eyes flashed with a hint of shock, gradually morphing into despair. He hoarsely tried to reach for me, but someone grabbed his hand. Who's this filthy thing? How dare you touch my wife? Aaron's loud voice rang in my ears. He disdainfully shoved Henry away. Aaron then wrapped his arm around my waist and gently asked, Are you done? Let her go. Henry glared fiercely at Aaron's hand on my waist, as if someone else had touched his possession. I found Henry quite amusing. He was sweet with his wife, yet still wanted to keep me around. After knowing me for so many years, didn't he realize that with my pride, I would never take on someone else's leftovers? Not to mention being someone's mistress. Ellie. Henry's gaze shifted to me, his eyes carrying a hint of shattered light. Next month, I'm getting married. If you want to come, you can ask Aaron for an invitation. I ignored Henry's look and smiled sweetly at Diana. I spoke each word deliberately. Marrying Aaron was certainly a well-thought-out decision. I had been in a coma for 3 years, and my company had barely survived with my mom's support. My uncles were all watching closely. Once I married Aaron, everything would be resolved. The message I sent Aaron that night on the cruise wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea. I believed I had the ability to revive the company, but I had been unconscious for so long. There was too much to learn. Before I was capable of taking over the company completely, I needed a support system. When I first woke up, I thought that support system was Henry. He had disappointed me greatly. Upon learning about his marriage, I was only sad for half an hour before quickly analyzing the situation. I decided on Aaron. You're getting married? Henry's face was filled with disbelief. What else would I be here for if not for a marriage checkup? Aaron spoke lazily, raising the list in his hand. Suddenly, Henry seemed to be stimulated, rushing over to grab me, but Aaron stepped in front of me to block him. I looked over Aaron's shoulder at Henry, whose face was gradually turning red. Get out of the way. I pushed Aaron aside. Aaron's eyes flashed with displeasure, but he still dared not disobey me. Henry, is it fun? You're married but still pretending to be the Henry who has always loved me. No. Henry shook his head, his voice even tinged with a slight choked sound. Seeing that he stubbornly refused to admit it, I lost my patience and slapped him across the face. What are you doing, hitting people? Diana rushed over to shield Henry, looking like a protective mother bear, glaring fiercely at me, her body bristling with anger. What are you doing? Henry frowned and pushed Diana aside, but my slap was quicker than his movement. You hit me? Diana covered her face, taking a while to register what had happened. I'm Aaron's legitimate wife. Tears welled up in her eyes, as if she had suffered great injustice. Our argument attracted quite a crowd. Upon hearing her words, people automatically placed me in the position of the mistress. I crossed my arms and looked at her average-looking face, smiling slightly. A woman who uses blood transfusions as a condition to get someone's boyfriend to marry her. Why can't I hit her? Well, if you like picking up garbage, then I'll give it to you. I'm a clean freak and never take back my trash. My voice was loud enough for the surrounding people to hear. The crowd immediately turned their attention toward Diana. She pitifully clutched Henry's hand, while Henry looked pale as he gazed at me. The day after the marriage checkup, I went with Aaron to get our marriage certificate. The wedding was set for the end of next month. The timeline was a bit tight. I didn't understand why Aaron was in such a hurry. Wife, there's still a month and a half until next month. There's no rush at all. Aaron didn't even look up, focused on his own work, his voice low and husky, utterly sexy. His hair was already soaked with sweat, and even with his handsome, carefree face lost in desire, he still retained a youthful aura. No wonder my friend said her brother was quite good. I personally experienced the good my friend spoke of. By the time we finished, it was already 11. Aaron helped me take a shower and then drove me home. As the car stopped outside my villa, Aaron unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned in to hug me, his face nuzzling into my neck. I don't want to be apart from you. I really want to bring you home soon. He rubbed his face against me like a Samoyed. I still had no idea how he managed to get his dad's approval for our marriage. After all, his dad and my mom once had quite a tumultuous past. See you tomorrow night, be good. I raised my hand to press against his head, gently rubbing it as if comforting a puppy. Aaron hugged me for a while longer before letting me out of the car. After I got out, I stood there holding my bag, watching Aaron leave. When the car disappeared from view, I turned to enter the gate. Just as I was about to go in, someone grabbed my wrist. Ellie. Before I could see who it was, I was pulled into an embrace that reeked of tobacco. I hated the smell of smoke and disliked men who smoked even more. His grip was so tight it made my bones ache. Henry, if you don't let go, I'll report you for sexual harassment. My voice was cold, devoid of any warmth. Not seeking revenge against Henry and Diana was already my greatest kindness, especially since Diana was the one who saved me back then, even if it was through that disgusting deal. I still had a long life ahead, and I didn't want to be entangled with insignificant people. It seemed, however, that Henry didn't think the same way. Ellie, at that time, I really had no other choice. I couldn't just watch you die in the operating room. The one I've always loved is you. Henry held me tightly, his voice choking with emotion, sounding sincere. If you've only ever loved me, why did you let someone else get pregnant? I pressed my lips together and chuckled lightly. Is Diana a hermaphrodite? Can she get pregnant by herself? The person holding me suddenly seemed to lose strength. That was just an accident. I frowned and pulled his hand away. I have no interest in your and Diana's affairs. I'm about to get married, and I don't want to be exposed for having my foot in two boats at this crucial moment. Don't come looking for me again, I don't want to see you. I said that and walked away without looking back. Henry used to love me deeply, so much that everyone was moved by his love. Gradually, I was also touched and fell in love with him. However, during the 3 years I was in a coma, his love was defeated by Diana, who had been by his side all along. I felt a bit unwilling to accept that he lost to someone like Diana, who only thought about men and had no morals. My reluctance wasn't because I still loved Henry, but because I felt disgusted. Diana's company wasn't large. If I wanted to take care of her, I only needed to lift a finger. I originally didn't want to deal with Diana, after all, she was just a man. But Henry's appearance today made me feel somewhat physically uncomfortable. Right now, I couldn't do anything to the Henry family, but the Diana family. One day, while I was handling business, I heard a commotion outside. Frowning, I set down my pen. "Ma'am, you can't go in," my secretary said just before my office door was pushed open. A furious Diana marched toward me. She stopped at my desk, biting her lip tightly. "What do you want to do? Aaron and I are already married. No matter what tricks you pull, he can't come back to you." I found it amusing. Could it be that in Diana's world, she saw nothing but men? "Miss Diana, I originally thought you were just immoral, but I didn't expect you to have such poor manners. Or is this how the Diana family conducts themselves?" I leaned back in my chair, watching Diana leisurely. When she heard my words, it seemed she felt deeply insulted, and tears began to fall. I truly love Aaron. I pressed my temples and instructed my secretary to call security to take Diana away. "She's pregnant, so be careful, don't let her pull any stunts," I warned the 2 security guards, who exchanged glances. They cautiously yet firmly escorted Diana from my office. The security at our company had been getting worse. They actually let her come up here so easily. It seemed there was still much to deal with. I opened a file and continued my work. 2 hours later, I finally finished the pile of documents on my desk. I stretched and prepared to head to the break room to make a cup of coffee. I mainly wanted to get up and move around. I had been sitting every day for so long that my back and butt were almost about to rebel. However, before I could get up, my phone, which was resting nearby, rang. Leaning back, I picked it up. At this hour, the only person who would call me was Aaron, but when I looked at the caller ID, I realized it wasn't him. Instead, it was a guy I had been on good terms with before my coma. He was the only one who came to see me the day I woke up. We hadn't been in touch for a long time. His sudden call felt a bit strange, but I answered it anyway, since people like us often had business interactions. "Ellie, are you trying to make Diana have a miscarriage?" His first sentence stunned me. He spoke frantically for a while before I learned the details. Diana had seen blood and was showing signs of a miscarriage. They claimed it was caused by me. "Why aren't you speaking?" The extremely disgruntled voice came through the phone. I raised an eyebrow and replied, "What are you so anxious about? Is the baby in Diana's belly yours?" Before he could say another word, I hung up and added him to my blacklist. Just a minute later, another call came in with nearly the same words. It was an old suitor of mine. I patiently blocked each one after another. I was afraid of losing everything by doing business with such idiots. "What, are you here to scold me because of Diana too?" I asked, sitting in the driver's seat with my arm resting on the car door, casually glancing at Henry standing beside the car. "I actually hope it's true that you're the one who did something to her." A bitter smile spread across Henry's lips. At least this would prove that Ellie still had feelings for him. I was a bit surprised that Henry didn't believe Diana's nonsense. "So, what do you want with me?" My patience was quite limited, especially since I was supposed to have dinner tonight with my mom, Aaron, and his dad. "Ellie, I know I was wrong, terribly wrong. As long as you're not angry, I can do anything." His hands clenched tightly at his sides, the veins on the back of his hands standing out. "Please don't marry him." Henry's posture was completely humble, but I remained unmoved. He was the one who betrayed me first. For betrayers like him, forgiveness was impossible in my eyes. "Anything at all?" I smiled gently, my voice soft. "Can you make the Diana family go bankrupt? I find her quite bothersome. Stealing someone else's boyfriend was one thing, but to come here and provoke me while trying to smear my name is unacceptable." With a smile, I recounted how those dozen calls had come in this afternoon to scold me, sharing the details with Henry. I didn't know if Henry still loved me, but I was straightforward about my feelings. Thus, I became the unattainable one for him. Perhaps I would become his lifelong unrequited love. After all, he loved to put on a deep emotional act. How could he let go of this opportunity? "As long as their family goes bankrupt, you'll forgive me, right?" A glimmer of hope sparkled in Henry's eyes. I lifted my chin slightly. He didn't say yes, nor did he say no. But Henry automatically associated the idea of Diana's family going bankrupt with my forgiving him and us reconciling as if it were a formula. "Ellie, wait for me." He held my hand and looked at me seriously. The determined light in his eyes momentarily made me dazed. On the day we officially started dating, he held my hand the same way and looked at me with that same expression, saying, "Ellie, I will take care of you for a lifetime." I watched his departing figure and smiled wryly to myself. A lifetime is far too long. I didn't expect to receive news of Diana's family going bankrupt so soon. It was only 3 days since I last saw Henry. This was my first encounter with Henry's ruthlessness. 2 months ago, he had exploded in fury on the yacht when Diana threatened to divorce him. Now, to gain my forgiveness, he could bring down Diana's family. I opened the surveillance footage at the entrance of the villa. As expected, Henry was dressed in a suit, holding the flowers I liked while waiting at the door. But he was destined to be disappointed. The day after our meeting, I went abroad on a business trip and wouldn't return until the evening before the wedding. "He's truly shameless," Aaron said as he hugged me from behind, his tone laced with suppressed anger. His kisses fell densely on my neck, and I felt a little ticklish. "Stop it, I still have work to finish." "Finish it later." He snatched the tablet from my hands, silencing me completely. I leaned back against the chair in the study. He always interrupted me at the worst times. If it weren't for his good looks and skills, I would have kicked him out long ago. Sister, you can only have me as your dog from now on, you can't keep any other dogs. Aaron breathed heavily as he lifted me up. His lustful gaze looked at me eagerly. I instinctively ruffled his hair. As long as you behave, you won't have to worry. It's okay to be a little bad sometimes, right, sister? Before I could savor the meaning behind Aaron's words, tears suddenly welled in the corners of my eyes, spilling down my cheeks and into my hair. Aaron, I must raise a few more dogs. He was just too much in this regard. I saw Aaron again on the day of the wedding, sitting in the makeup room in my white wedding dress. He stumbled in, looking quite disheveled. I hadn't seen him for a month. He looked much more haggard, and the previous air of nobility was gone from his face. Ellie, I've made sure Diana's family goes bankrupt as promised, and Diana's baby has been lost. Please don't be angry with me anymore, okay? Don't marry Aaron. He squatted beside me, his eyes pleading. His bloodshot eyes were filled with emotion. I lowered my gaze. I never promised that Diana's family going bankrupt would mean I would forgive you, and the loss of Diana's child has nothing to do with me. The light in Henry's eyes gradually dimmed. He panicked and desperately tried to grab me. I clapped my hands toward the door, and two bodyguards in black suits pushed the door open and walked in. I had anticipated Henry would come today. I had arranged for someone to protect me early this morning. I didn't want anything unexpected to happen on my wedding day. When Henry was dragged away, his eyes were red. Ellie, why are you always so calm? Did you ever love me? He stared at me intently, tears streaming down his cheeks. I remained silent. Let him guess for a lifetime. Henry's side story. In my freshman year of high school, I fell in love with Ellie at first sight. I pursued her for 5 years, and for her sake, I started studying hard. We both got into the same university. Ellie always had a lot of male admirers, and it only increased in college. Every day, there were people confessing their feelings to her. I was anxious and worried. I had been pursuing her for over 3 years, but it seemed she still didn't like me. I could only double my efforts to treat her well, hoping that one day she would see my feelings. In the end, I won her heart. For the 2 years I was with Ellie, I felt like I was walking on clouds, as if it were all unreal. I loved her so much. I wanted to propose to her after graduation. I was eager to marry her and keep her by my side. But on the day I planned to propose, she got into a car accident. I felt like the sky was falling down. Because Ellie had a rare blood type, I had no choice but to agree to Diana's demands. I truly hated Diana. I had never seen a woman so shameless. After we got married, I continued to treat her coldly, but my parents liked her very much. They said Diana was very good at taking care of people. In front of Ellie, I was always the weaker one because I loved more, so I gave more. Gradually, my feelings for Diana changed. The way she loved me was too similar to how I loved Ellie. I developed a sense of sympathy and understanding for her. It was precisely for this reason that I made a grave mistake. When I woke up in the same bed as Diana, I couldn't accept it at all. After the marriage, I betrayed Ellie once again. I treated Diana with an even worse attitude than before, but she always remained silent. She would prepare meals at home waiting for me to come back. She would come to pick me up in the middle of the night when I was drunk and then make me a bowl of hangover soup. My friends said she was a good girl and urged me to treat her well. At that time, Ellie had been in a coma for 3 years. I had actually lost all hope, and just when I had made up my mind to say goodbye to the past and live well with Diana, Ellie woke up. I was overjoyed, but then I thought of Diana. Ellie had awakened. What would she do? Ellie was still the same as she had been 3 years ago, still the most confident and proud first socialite in S City, the one I had been madly in love with. I had thought about ending things with Diana, but after spending 3 years together, it seemed impossible to do so. That night on the yacht, I was too impulsive. I actually went to save Diana in front of Ellie. As the night went on without any contact from Ellie, I gradually began to panic. It wasn't until much later that I encountered Ellie again in the hospital. By then, Diana was pregnant, and my heart was even more conflicted. But the moment I saw Aaron's arm naturally draping around Ellie, I knew I had made a grave mistake. I enjoyed the meticulous care that Diana provided me. In her presence, I could find the kind of admiration and deep love that I never felt with Ellie. But this was not love. The only person I ever loved was Ellie, and yet she would never forgive me. In the 3rd year after Ellie married Aaron, her family was flourishing under her management. She began to deliberately take away my business partners and suppress my business. I knew she was doing it on purpose. This long-awaited revenge, 3 years in the making, had finally arrived.